What if I could tell you the one secret that would change how you feel about using interview frameworks? Well, the one secret is focus on your strengths. One of the most common questions I get asked is, what framework should I use? But the framework concepts that you use should really be unique to you. We should not be introducing or discussing concepts that are not our strengths. And so in this video, we're going to just cover a few basic items that are going to absolutely help you crush the interview and really highlight how leading and using our strengths all the time is going to be a massive benefit to us. So item one, the basics. Frameworks are used when answering hypothetical and open-ended questions. And what is a framework? Frameworks are an outline or approach that candidates should use as an organizational tool to present a high-level solution to the interviewer. Simply put, frameworks help you provide a very structured approach when solving typically for massive amounts of ambiguity, and having no framework will likely make your answer pretty disorganized. And while some argue against frameworks, unless you're in that rare group of people who never prepares and never practices for an interview and always crushes it, utilizing frameworks will greatly increase your success rate. Item two, strengths identification. So what is this exercise? Well, it's actually 3 steps. Step 1 is just doing generic identification. Simply write down what you believe to be all your strengths. And this actually isn't that easy. It can be a process of self-identification, but we can also ask others too, people you know, you trust, and ask them a very simple question such as, what do you think are my 3 greatest strengths? Now, step 2 is going to be a little bit more role specific. The second exercise, and I'll pin a card up there for a video that will take you through this, but the second exercise is really identifying the needs of the position and role and how your strengths align with that position. So you're going to be looking throughout the job description just generically, and then you're going to be thinking, okay, well, what are my technical strengths? What are maybe my process and strategy strengths? What are my collaboration and people strengths, etc.? And step 3 is really simple. We're going to combine. So what we're looking for is we're looking to find the crossovers from the job and the crossovers just generically what we know we're good at. And then look for some nuances as well. Like what are those areas that are very, very role specific, and just make sure we're capturing that and getting that all down into a Google Doc. Item 3 is the cadence. And specifically what I want to focus in on this cadence item is leading with your strength. So what does this actually sound like during the interview? You always want to start with clarifying questions, and then you're going to present your framework with a transition statement such as a few items we should focus in on. For example, we might talk about goals, data, collaboration, and risks, for example. Then we would transition with our interviewer, Sue. I think we should start by focusing in on data, but is there another area you want to focus on? Rarely is your interviewer going to pivot you, but if you start with data because you know it's your biggest strength, in the solution, we may only get to this one concept. So let's always lead with our strength. Let's always go big. Same on the behavioral side. In the phone interview, we're not holding back, or that initial interview, we're not holding back our best answers because there might not be a later. So we always lead with our strengths as early and often as possible. Item 4, practice. I have to go here, but now that we've identified our core strengths, we have to start trying to see how this sounds by delivering it as a framework and seeing if these concepts truly do align, if they're as good as we think from a framework perspective. So to create hypothetical/open-ended questions, all I want you to do is simply start with maybe a few phrases to start creating them. Something like, I want you to imagine, how would you, what would you, and then simply insert a keyword or phrase or theme from the job description. So for example, let's say we're interviewing for a customer engineer role for Google, and we know data migration is going to be in that job description. So we just put that into a few practice questions. So just to show you the examples, I want you to imagine you have to conduct a data migration. What would you do? How would you conduct a data migration? What would you do if you were asked to conduct a data migration? So simply just repeat this for the critical keywords and themes, and creating practice questions is actually pretty simple. We just got to go into the job description and know that these are the key phrases that many open-ended hypothetical questions will start with. So for item 5, let's focus in on lesser strengths. Now that you've practiced a few questions, hopefully more than a few, you've likely found your framework was maybe not complete as it correlated or related to the role by just focusing in on your critical strengths. So now it's time to prioritize just a few other items, and usually these are items from the job description. Areas that you know you have a good foundational knowledge, but maybe they're not the items that you're leading with. So maybe, as we mentioned earlier, data is hands down one of our greatest strengths. Well, assessing risk is not one of our greatest strengths, but it's definitely a strength of ours, something that we still do pretty well. You'll want to introduce that concept too, especially if you think it's critical to answering the interview question that's been asked of you. Now let's go to item 6, not strengths. Now let's say budgeting. You know it's in the JD, but it's not a strength of yours at all. It's not a strength of mine. And we may not want to then introduce it into the framework, but we can introduce it into our solution. So for example, let's say you're interviewing for a program manager role, and you know this is a critical concept, and maybe you share this as a smaller concept within your solution, meaning let's say we had to lead with risk. It wasn't our greatest strength, but we led with it because it best answers the question. In our solution, we might mention that budgeting is a critical item when identifying risks, but we don't really have to get into the weeds of it. That's it. All you need to do is really go through the exercise of identifying your strengths, get a little bit into the job description, do some practice. Obviously, you're going to want to understand the cadence. I'll put the frameworks playlist down in the YouTube description. And then start to think about lesser strengths and then some of those other items that you know are critical that you're going to want to introduce in your answers, but maybe not be using as framework concepts. I really hope this short video helps. Thanks.